Good morning.
Good morning.
It is indeed an honor and a pleasure to be here. And I want to begin just by thanking Sylvia Coleman and the entire Owensboro Human Relations Commission, not only for putting this on every year, which it is a wonderful part of our celebration of this great weekend every year, but also for your long-standing commitment to human rights in Owensboro. Your work is really important, and it's an important time for the work that you're doing, so thank you. Before I dig into my remarks, I also want to recognize some of my colleagues in the Owensboro Public Schools. I know that we have our board chair here, John Blaney. John, thank you for being here. And John DeLacy is in the back of the room. He's the principal of Owensboro High School. He was there bright and early welcoming people to that high school, so thank you for that and for being here, John. And I know that Courtney Engelbarger, our principal at Cravens, whose choir did such a great job, is here. I think I saw Melissa Brown earlier this morning, who's the principal of our Gateway Academy. So thanks to their leadership and to their support, and to my family. My lovely wife, as you heard introduced, our chamber president, and my two children who got out of bed, and I told them that they might be sleepy, but once that march started, they'd be awake. I think everybody woke up, and I do want to echo, because there's a lot of OPS students here, and other students, Wesleyan students, Precious students, community college, and students from the Davis County system and the Catholic system. So thanks to all of you for being a part of this important march. When Sylvia contacted me about serving as the speaker today, it was the end of 2015. And 2015 was a year much like 1968, much like 2001, where humanity saw sort of a new low in suffering, intolerance, and violence. Human rights, it seems, took a step backwards after some years of progress, or at least the illusion of some progress. My mind spun as I thought about what I might be able to say on the heels of a year where abuses to human rights came at every turn. Unfortunately, we saw last year the triumph of fear, hate, and ignorance reach its end. I could spend some time talking about terrorism, mass shootings, racial strife, and the senseless gun violence that impacted cities large and small. Unfortunately, Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, Aquan McDonald, Eric Garner have become household names. I could talk about refugees and immigrants. The subject is somewhat personal to me. I don't look like a refugee or an immigrant, but my family came here some years ago. I'm only a third-generation American. The school system that I serve has the responsibility of educating numerous immigrant groups seeking hope and refuge. I have seen and experienced firsthand compassion and ugliness directed at refugees in our city. It is a challenge to serve some of the refugees in our schools because of language barriers and a scarcity of resources for English language learners. But I'm proud to represent a district that opens its arms to such students.
All right.
We need to do a better job in many areas of educating them, but what I see daily runs counter to the hateful rhetoric that I hear on the television. I see pure love in the faces of those who serve them and these students every day in our school. I see nurses that provide care and go the extra mile to see that they have what they need. I see family advocates stand up to landlords that are allowing some of these refugee students to live in homes that are threatened by lead poisoning. I've seen teachers and coaches not only give our refugee students a ride home, but routinely stop and feed them first. The actions I see all around our community in welcoming immigrants to Owensboro defeat the war of words and the rhetoric at our state and national levels. I could talk about religion. It is inconceivable to think that banning an entire religious group entered the mainstream public sphere in 2015.
That's right.
That idea is often counterbalanced with an inconsistent attitude among many ultra-conservative who carry a cross of bigotry rather than love and forgiveness.
That's right.
It is disgusting that in 2015, more than 36 religiously affiliated institutions of higher education have asked the federal government to waive Title IX provisions of sexual equality so they don't have to offer such protections to LGBT students at their institutions. But many of the actions I see in my community and at Owensboro High School, where my children attend school, run counter to that hate. I see acceptance, toleration, a celebration of diversity of religions, as well as our LGBT population. I applaud and I support the efforts of the Human Relations Commission to bring the Fairness Ordinance to Owensboro. But the main issue that I want to address, and our theme on this Martin Luther King Day 2016, is the unfinished business of Dr. King in advocating for economic justice through his Poor People's Campaign. He was hard at work organizing this campaign in the weeks leading up to his assassination. Still today, 50 years later, it is the most compelling issue, I think, of our time, and one that is widely intertwined with all the other issues that I just mentioned. In Dr. King's day, President Lyndon Johnson declared a war on poverty. 51 years later, we now wage a war on the poor.
That's right.
Where 51% of our public school students nationally live in poverty. In the Owensboro Public School, that number is nearly 80%. These students live in conditions with few educational resources in their homes. Only a third of the students that start school with us, that start kindergarten, are ready to learn. Their parents face unemployment, underemployment, food insecurity, a lack of stable housing, and many other obstacles that undermine their ability to learn. Harvard sociologist Robert Putnam, sometimes called the poet laureate of civil society, published a compelling and disturbing book last year that should be a rally cry for human relations commissions nationwide. The book, Our Kids, through a series of interviews, profiles, family portraits of today's kids, backed up by data, shows that we are dividing into two very different Americas. As a society, we are sorting ourselves by income, by family structure, parenting styles, and the kinds of communities which we live. Class-based residential segregation is on the increase. We used to be able to confidently say that a child born in America had many advantages to children born elsewhere. But those advantages are far more dependent on family background in the U.S. than we might wish. It's not only that some kids are rich and others are poor, it's also that some have educated parents, including a mother and a father in the home, who possess the social capital as well as the resources of time and money to ensure that their children have the kind of preparation for school by the time they reach age 4 or 5. At the other end of the spectrum is a group of children whose early home life, or lack thereof, make it far more difficult for them to succeed. These are kids whose fathers may be incarcerated, whose mothers may be working long hours at low-wage jobs, who live in troubled neighborhoods with little to occupy their time, and whose parents lack the connections and the knowledge needed to put them on a path to the middle class. These gaps between rich and poor, between the privileged and underprivileged, are growing, suggesting that whatever degree of social mobility that has existed in our country in the past is now under threat. Such growing gaps have profound implications for what we do in education and the whole idea that schools can compensate for what children do not receive at home and in their communities. In the Owensboro Public Schools, we have long had a sense that we don't talk about the kind of differences of our kids based on where they reside and the neighborhoods that they come from. We serve them all, we love them all, and we have high expectations of all. And there's enormous truth to that notion. And we take pride in serving all the students in our system. We have a lot of work to do to improve, especially as it relates to some achievement gaps, but I would match our urban system against any in the country. But the reality, according to Putnam, is that the gaps that exist between these students are created more by what happens outside of school and by what kids bring or don't bring with them to school than by what schools do. His case studies comparing students the last 30 to 40 years to students today show that these gaps are becoming wider and much, much more difficult to bridge. Rather than achievement gaps, we are creating opportunity gaps.
All right.
And for that reason, I break the long-standing tradition in our district of not talking about the differences with our kids. I can't ignore obscene levels of poverty that I see every day and not talk about it.
All right. All right. All right.
By ignoring it, I would admit to you that we have all the tools that we need to solve the problem. The truth is we do not. Schools cannot and ought not be the primary anti-poverty program for our country, for our state, and for our community. The growing inequality in our nation is hurting our upward mobility, and we bear the consequences if we don't act to deal with it as a community. We've watched massive cutbacks of programs to uplift poor families.
Yes.
And we have to act to save the American dream. It is really a matter of justice.
All right.
Horace Mann said over a century ago that education was the great equalizer. And data show that he was right. Just a few decades ago, the gap between rich and poor families finishing a college degree was about 30 percentage points. In just a few years, that gap has risen dramatically to over 50%. Today, education is more like the great fortifier, compounding advantages of class than the great equalizer. International rankings reflect this trend. While much attention is paid to where the U.S. ranks relative to other developed nations in reading and math, you don't often hear that we rank second last among high-performing countries in economic equity and support for families. And we rank dead last in social stress measures such as death from violence, drug use, and teenage births. All of this is intertwined. Despite these crippling trends and awesome challenges, the Owensboro Public Schools firmly believe in Nelson Mandela's idea that education is the most powerful weapon to change the world.
That's right.
We focus on the whole child in a way of providing as much social capital as we can to students from disadvantaged situations. That is why, as you saw today, we have one of the best performing arts programs in the country. We do this so that our students can have dance lessons, so that they can learn music, and it builds their confidence every time they perform on the stage of the River Park Center. That is why every 5th through 12th grade student receives an Apple computer to join the 21st century world of technology. That's why we focus on early childhood education with our partnership with Head Start at Hager Preschool. And we've invested in a comprehensive family approach to literacy with a program called Footsteps to Brilliance that provides thousands of books electronically to students at home and at daycare before they even reach us in school. We try to run our food service program like an efficient business, which along with support from the federal government enables us to provide meals to every student in our district at no cost.
All right, good.
At the high school level, we offer students career pathway options and the option of an associate degree through our early college academy while they're enrolled at OHS. After 20 years of their existence, Kentucky is finally entering the charter school debate. While research on charter schools is mixed at best, there are some great examples where charter school options can be beneficial to students in poverty, English language learners, and minorities. For that reason, we offer school choice for OPS high school students through a charter school life program in partnership with the Davis County Public Schools called the Owensboro Innovation Academy. I want to again thank my colleague and friend, your Superintendent of the Year, Owen Saylor, for the discontinued partnership with our students. I support charter schools. With proper oversight and involvement of local districts, they can really provide a good example, a good option for students. The Owensboro Innovation Academy is an example of school choice that can make a positive difference, and is making a positive difference for some of these students. But charters are not a silver bullet, especially when the effort is to sweep in and close a failing school in places like the West End of Louisville. Failed schools are typically the result of a failed neighborhood. You almost never see a failing school in a healthy neighborhood. As a state, we need to be vigilant as charter schools enter our education system. Many for-profit ventures in places like Ohio and Florida are doing far more education harm than good. Human relations groups need to be aware that many charters are nothing more than efforts to bypass serving disadvantaged and students with disabilities.
All right, all right.
So let's walk through this debate together, and I think we can do the right thing for the students in our community and our state.
All right.
As a community overall, it's critical to make sure that we have adequate housing and we put an end to landlords that provide inadequate conditions for the health and safety of their tenants.
Okay.
It is reprehensible that we have property owners charging rent to hardworking families while their children are suffering from lead poisoning.
Well.
It's not one or two isolated instances. We have collapsing stairwells. We have exposed electrical outlets. Where children in our district lived in such substandard housing, yet being extorted, their parents being extorted by landlords for leases in excess of $900 a month. One mother that I met actually voluntarily, this breaks my heart, voluntarily contacted social services to turn in her children because she didn't want them to live in such a dangerous place. That should not happen.
That's right. That's
in
right.
this town.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
The expansion of health insurance has made a real difference for students and families in our school district. We have many needs, and those needs are especially acute in the area of mental health we still have to address. Recent cuts to child care benefits and the threat of ending Kentucky's health care program by our new governor would really set us back.
Oh, yeah. All right. That's right.
I applaud and I repeat the words of Judge Executive Al Mattingly in the State of the County address, calling attention to the need for better child care and calling attention to the lack of social mobility in Owensboro, particularly acute among minorities, immigrants, and women. I am glad that he's raised the idea of an increase in the minimum wage to remain competitive.
That's right. That's right.
There is a clear level of frustration and downright anger reverberating around our state and our country right now. I recently met a young man at a Christmas program in one of our schools who lost his $22 an hour job. He used his savings to get a credential at the community college. Thank God for the community college. His expectation is that he had a GED, he has a post-secondary certificate, he'd do even better now. Only to find that after he finally found a job in his trade area, his wage was way below what he expected it would be. And when he was promoted to a supervisor's role, his pay barely went up at all. In larger numbers, Americans are finding that this is the only kind of economy open to them. And I was struck by a letter in the paper yesterday that was written by a young lady who lives in Owensboro. Many of you may have seen it. It was in Sunday's perspective section. She's a single mother, 6-month-old daughter, works 45 hours a week, brings home $1,300 a month. That's about $15,000 a year to live on. She's told she makes too much for medical card, food stamps, child care assistance. She lives in government housing. When she's done paying for all of her bills, she's got about $183 left to pay for gas, food, diapers, formula. She can qualify for WIC, but she has to work. And the only time they do it is the same-day appointment during the day, so she'd have to take a day off or be threatened with losing a job. And her point was that this is not fair. Folks, a person that works a full-time job
All right.
should make a living wage.
That's right. That's right.
And this is a very typical parent of those that I meet in our school system. Many, in fact, most have jobs. Many more than I'd like to tell you have 2 jobs. 30 years ago, we had sources of countervailing power, as John Kenneth Galbraith, the economist, said. They were labor unions, they were other associations that protected people. I'm a supporter of free market economics, but it doesn't seem to me that we really have a free market anymore. It seems like the bottom 90% of Americans, skilled laborers like the man I described, small business owners, working poor like this lady who wrote the article in the paper, entrepreneurs, student debtors, small investors, homeowners, white, black, Latino men, women, are losing ground in large part of an upward redistribution inside our free market rules that seem to benefit the Wall Street crowd, top executives of large corporations, and many politicians, none of them in this room. But many of the politicians who seem to be under the control of these groups because of Citizens United. It's not right that Donald Trump can escape the debt of bankruptcy, but working families can't escape the debt of health care.
All right.
And face it, just about everybody here is one of those 90%. And we have to work together as allies to form a new level of countervailing power. It doesn't have to be a union, but we have to figure out how to get a handle of this highly rigged economic system that is more and more plutocratic than it is free market. We can begin by making sure everybody votes.
All right.
And I don't care whether we have to have marches like we did today, but something has to break.
All right.
This is what happened about a century ago to usher in what I think is, and what many economists think is the greatest period of success in the U.S. economy, which created a strong and prosperous middle class from the New Deal through the GI Bill. But today, it seems the narrative of the New Deal has been turned on its head when characters like Ebenezer Scrooge from Christmas Carol and Old Man Potter, from It's a Wonderful Life, came off the Christmas season. They've gone through re-evaluations as good, honest, hardworking men that disdain takers like Bob Cratchit and George Bailey. When policy is in the interest of 10%, then the best strategy for that 10% is to divide the remaining 90%. And they do it with issues like guns, like religion, like immigration, like sexual orientation. I'm both optimistic and fearful for the youth that are coming through. Optimistic because the young people that I'm around in my home and at school, they get it. They will lead us to a better place than the past few generations.
Okay.
All right. I'm fearful because I don't want us to leave them with such an impossible task. The Nobel laureate Salman Rushdie, who delivered the commencement address at Emory University this past year, captured it this way. I'll quote him. "My generation has not made good use of our time on earth. It is right, I think, to apologize for the mess we are leaving. The whole ecological, fanatical, oligarchic mess in which 1% of our country gets everything while kids are being killed daily for the crime of being black. In which religious bigots in this country think Jesus wants them not to sell cupcakes to gay couples.
All right.
Religious bigots elsewhere think their God approves of sewing off the heads of innocent men.
All right.
We thought ourselves, my lot, as tolerant and progressive, and we're leaving you an intolerant and progressive world."
All right.
Now, not to be bleak, folks, but I really do have a lot of faith in the generation that's in our schools today. Ask John DeLacy back there what his day is like at Owensboro High School. I'm confident that they'll be able to turn our intolerance into compassion, our inequality into innovation and new ideas that will make a difference in realizing Dr. King's dream of providing both work and income to those inevitably left behind by capitalism's economic engine. Dr. King's dream was that there'd be a guaranteed middle-class wage for everyone in our country. And it would require work, but it would also be a guaranteed income. The dream should not be just to alleviate poverty, but to raise each American to the middle class. I said it earlier, and I'll say it again. People that work a full-time job deserve to have a living wage.
That's right.
Government should not be the enemy in this. We, the people, are the government.
Okay.
It's a government for the people, by the people.
That's right.
That's our social contract. And I believe that these ideas should come from the best of all levels of our political spectrum, from the right, from the left, from the Democrats, from the Republicans.
Okay.
Pastor Robertson yesterday at the really great talk that he gave, the NAACP, talked about the importance of family values.
Okay.
And that has a major role
Yes.
because of the issues that we face with
Yes.
families. But so does enhancing our social safety net.
Yes.
Only together will we be able to save this American dream of equal opportunity. Mayor Ron Payne, I regret he's not here today, but in his State of the City address declared 2016 to be the year of the child in Owensboro. The issues that I've outlined here today, issues of social and economic justice, are at their core children's issues. Our recent history demonstrates that cities, not Congress or state legislatures, with all due respect to the great legislators we have in the room, they are the engines of progress in our country.
Okay.
It's happening all around.
Okay.
Mayor Payne has certainly demonstrated to us great progress in our city over the last few years. That's why I think we need to support his efforts to promote causes that uplift children in this community over the coming months. Today I will go on record as the first to volunteer my services to this cause. Pam, will you please? Thank you again to the Human Relations Commission for all the work that you do. May your work be continually blessed by the great example of Dr. Martin Luther King.